Sean from Fort Worth, Texas, hit me up. He said, are there any updates on playoff changes for 2025? That's this season. He said he was wondering if I had heard anything since the last segment. It's a good question. So I still think changes are possible for this fall. What Sean's talking about is all this drama, all this talk about whether there's going to be an expansion to 14 or 16 teams, whether there's going to be an automatic qualifier structure where we already know how many teams the SEC will get in or the Big Ten will get in. All that is probably coming, but all that's coming in 2026. And as Sean noted, we kind of have a season before 2026, this fall, the here and now, the right in front of us. And there's been talk, there have been rumblings that we may have a little adjustment to the playoff field this year. It's going to be the same number of teams, so we're still going to have 12, but the SEC and the Big Ten have been pushing pretty hard to remove the auto bid structure going only to conference champs. So this past year, you saw Boise have a first round bye. You saw Arizona State have a first round bye. That's because the rules said those top 4 seeds, the first round byes could only go to conference champs. Well, they didn't like that. Most people didn't. Most college football fans looked at it. I did too, and I said, this makes no sense. So they want to scrap it, but not everyone wants to scrap it. So they met this past week in Dallas, and there was a lot of reporting on that. And the reporting was basically everyone emerged from the meetings, and the Big Ten and the SEC didn't say anything publicly, and other commissioners found the nearest microphone and said, well, we may budge on that, but we got to see if it makes sense. Saw a couple of people, I think Rich Clark, the chair of the CFP, said, we got to run some data to make sure it makes sense. Now, that statement makes no sense. In theory, it does. What he's saying is, well, if we're just going to go with 1 through 12, which is what the SEC and the Big Ten want, if we're just going to seed it straight, the most simple approach, 1 through 12 equals 1 through 12, and the top 4 get a first round bye no matter what conference they're from, we want some data historically that backs up that makes sense. Past data is irrelevant because past data is reflective of a sport that doesn't exist anymore. The sport in the past didn't look like it does now. Texas was not in the SEC in the data set that you're going to pull. Oregon was not in the Big Ten in the data set you're going to pull. So that makes no sense. But none of it makes sense is the point, Sean. So what you need to really, really bear in mind is there are a bunch of people in these rooms right now. No one's goal is to look out for the best interest of college football because we don't have a commissioner. We've got conference commissioners, so everyone's in the room looking out for their own best interests. Not the most radical concept in the world. We do that in other walks of life too. Sort of a little representative college football government, if you will, but it kind of sucks for the common sense folks who look and say, well, I don't really care which conference benefits or which conference gets the shaft. I kind of want what's best for the sport because no one else is thinking that way. So that means, Sean, what makes sense to you and what seems like common sense to me is probably the last thing that's going to happen because of that, because it's common sense. Each commissioner is looking to secure value for their own conference. So, how are we going to get change this fall? Well, the game of chicken that's happening right now is a couple of, hey, quick timeout. Check and see if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you're not, I humbly ask that you click subscribe. It's free. It doesn't sign you up for anything. What it does is it helps us keep this show free so we can just do college football year-round. All right, back to the clip. Couple of different layers. So right now, we got 1 year left on the current deal, the current 12-team format, if you will. And this fall, if nothing changes, we'll have the same rules we had last year. The SEC and the Big Ten want to change this year's rules to where it's just straight seed. Nobody cares about auto bids only going to conference champs. Just whoever the 1 through 12 is, that's who gets it. The other conferences are looking and saying, maybe we'll give you concessions there. But they're trying to leverage the concessions in 2025 to maybe get something for themselves in 2026 and beyond because they know what reality is. Reality is, starting in 2026 and beyond, they're going to have a new deal. And also, 2026 and beyond, the SEC and the Big Ten do not need consensus approval to make changes. They do right now. That's the problem for them. They don't need consensus 2026 and beyond. So it kind of already is their world, but it really will be their world moving forward. So there's backroom negotiation happening right now. There is a part of me, Sean, if I'm being honest, there's a part of me that believes this has been the long game the SEC and the Big Ten have been playing all along. I know it seems randomized. I know from day to day it seems like it's really chaotic and no one knows what's going to come. Yeah, that's like if I start in Atlanta and I'm driving to LA and I plug it in the GPS, it could take me a few different directions, but I know my endpoint's Los Angeles, California. I'm going to get there. I think the Big Ten and the SEC, there's part of me that believes the Big Ten and the SEC have always known the end game here is their own version of the NFC and AFC existing in college football. And whatever year that was going to happen in was whatever year it was going to happen in. But this has been several years running now. There's been a voice in my head that said, they know all they have to do is wait. I mean, when you're earning twice as much as the other guys out there, or 3 times as much, and when the trajectory of you versus them continues to widen the gap, not close it, all you got to do is wait. It's like having a village surrounded. You don't have to go in there and attack them. All you got to do is blockade supplies coming in. They'll eventually starve to death. Or either they'll come out and they'll plead with you and you'll get whatever you want out of them. College football probably ends up playing out the same way. Do I love it? No, I actually hate it. But there's a part of me that believes this has been the long game all along. And there maybe have been some twists and turns, but by and large it's gone the direction the SEC and the Big Ten have always wanted it to go. So then the logical follow-up question, Sean, if you're like me and you hate how that sounds, is, well, how do we fix it? Well, I'll tell you how you don't fix it. You don't fix it by sort of jerry-rigging the college football playoff to make a 2-conference sport still appear to be more than that. What you do is you turn college football into something more than a 2-conference sport. In other words, you go in reverse, because sometimes going backwards is going forward. The road that we've gone down, in the eyes of many, is kind of sort of a dead-end road. And if it's not a dead-end road, it's far too narrow, and we can't all fit on it. So there was a time, kids, not too long ago, where college football was regional, it was territorial, and there was representation across the country. They may have been more passionate in the South than they were parts of the West Coast about college football. There may have been bigger population centers. There may have been more high school talent in Texas than there was in, the Pacific Northwest, but there was representation everywhere. That's the answer for fixing your problem here. It's not hoping the public doesn't realize the sport has become one in which only 2 conferences are really competitive at the highest levels. Because apparently in this next structure, they're going to hope that you're dumb enough to still believe that there are 4 power conferences, when of course there aren't. There are some teams in the Big 12 and the ACC that could compete for a little while against teams in the Big 12 or Big 10 and SEC, but long term, Michigan State's in a better position than Clemson is. Like Arkansas is in a better position than Miami is, strictly because of conference affiliation. So I don't know what the fix is there. I don't know if we're going to get 2025 resolution. I still think it's a 50-50 thing. I really don't have a strong feel either way. I don't particularly care. I will talk about it on the show because I know you guys do. It is what it is to me at this point.